Okay, welcome. Welcome to the Seven Stones Peer Coaching. I'm here with Kelsey.
Hi.
Kelsey has been a great collaborator, has really helped to innovate and create peer coaching at Seven Stones, has been a participant and also a project manager, and now bravely and generously volunteering to provide a demonstration of part of a coaching conversation. So the point of this conversation is going to be to demonstrate the first stage of a learning conversation, what we call opening the gap. And Kelsey is going to be in the role of coachee. I'll be in the role of coach. And we're going to try to show the main principles of how that kind of conversation happens. So first, I want to thank you, Kelsey, for being willing to bring a topic, a real challenge, and share it with the participants. So just to provide some context, I'm going to share with you what we call the Convu map, the structure and roles of a learning conversation, and in particular, that the central river there represents the experience of the coachee. So in this case, Kelsey, and we're going to focus on that first stage, opening the gap. And what we're saying here is that both coach and coachee have a role. The coachee's role is to engage in learning, to be willing to share what's true for them, to focus on, to reflect on what may be unresolved, unclear to them, in some cases that may feel vulnerable. And through that sort of investment, through that trust that they extend in the conversation, get the benefits of learning. And the reason we offer this image is we say that when learning is happening, whether it's a formal learning conversation or it happens informally in life, it tends to go through these stages where the first part is just to get clear on, well, what is it that I want to learn? What is it that's at stake? What's the nature of the challenge? And ultimately, what do I wish I knew how to do better or more easily? From there, the focus tends to narrow. Okay, well, how would we accomplish that? What are the options? What are the insights that might be helpful? And the generate insight phase produces the ahas. From the ahas, we tend to naturally get clear on what we want to do about it. So that's when you have a sense of resolve and commitment, and you tend to go ahead and try new things. So in this conversation, we're going to be focusing just on that first part because it's so important. It helps you get off on the right foot. It helps you focus on something that matters and kind of get clearly in view the coachee's role in the matter, their opportunity to learn what it is that they want. And so it kind of really sets you off on the right path. Now, on either bank of this river, there is the role of the coach. So the coach provides support and also challenge. And what I'm going to invite you to observe in this conversation is the support moves, the ways in which I walk with Kelsey, in which I try to move it with her and see things through her eyes, empathize, validate, understand, and really be there with her so she feels like I get it. Okay, that's going to be my main goal with that part of the conversation. And then you'll notice that there'll also be some times when I provide some structure, where I ask a question, where I offer a new perspective, where Kelsey feels me offering respectful challenges that help to enliven and bring some freshness to the conversation. And I'm going to invite you, dear sort of observer, to pay special attention both to those support moves and those challenge moves, and then ultimately to when is it that you feel like there's learning happening, the most learning happening? When does the flow become tangible in the conversation?
Okay, so just a few comments before we get started. You'll notice this video does have subtitles across the bottom. That does make it optimal to watch as a video rather than as an audio recording. they refer to pacing moves and leading moves. And that's just synonyms for challenge and support. Okay, so pacing means I'm walking with Kelsey or trying to, and leading means I might be pointing in different directions, saying, hey, come over here, or let's stop for a minute, or let's try on a new perspective. Another thing that happens in the subtitles is that I walk us through the steps of the process to open a gap. So those of you who have printed out your Convu maps will notice a second page that looks something like this. And I'll be walking us through these 6 steps using the subtitles to kind of indicate and orient you as to where we are. Finally, just a note on the difference between the map and the territory. So people often comment that, oh, I didn't realize that it could be so slow or it could be so fast. And one of the things that happens is we're trying to sync up and find the right rhythm in order to work with the process, work with what wants to happen. So you'll notice that happening in this conversation. There'll be some parts where it kind of has a slow feeling and some other parts where it speeds up. And I invite you to really try to like feel into that and ultimately to listen for when is the sound of learning happening? When is there a flow where learning seems to be taking shape and it's sort of opening up. So that's the main thing that we're listening for, because the whole peer coaching practice is about doing things that foster the sound of learning.
I'm going to go full screen. So I'm looking just at you and all distractions are minimized and we can relax. And I just would love to hear, what is it that's been on your mind and on your heart that you'd like to talk about today?
Thank you, Mark. So I had this issue come up this past week. It's now Thursday and this happened on Monday, so it's pretty fresh still. So I actually am glad that we're able to sit down and talk about it. So I guess I'll provide a little bit of context for, before we jump right into what the issue is. So my husband and I have been together since we were in high school. And we have 2 really good friends that we have had thus far a lifelong friendship. We're 10 plus years is what we're going on. And now they live in Philadelphia, where we're originally from, and my husband and I live in Dallas, Texas. So it's, even with all of the virtual things available, it's hard for us to get together. We kind of committed to one another in, like 2019, that we would try to get together at least one time a year to do some type of like adventurous / new exploration vacation thing. And it's honestly one of the things that we all look forward to, because they're just those type of people where you feel like you're going to have them in your life hopefully for a very long time. And so we love them dearly. So we have this trip planned for August, and it's now April. We had started planning in January earlier this year, and this time around I'll call them friend A, B. They're going to bring their partners with them, so they each have a girlfriend. Yes, they each have a girlfriend, and that's one really exciting, because for the longest time I was the only partner of that group. Friend A and friend B are both they identify as males, so for a long time it was just me and these group of 3 guys. So it's exciting, because that means I get to make new friends, and hopefully their partners they have been really awesome. We've met them, and we enjoy their company. So we have this planned, and friend B's partner, this is kind of where the issue comes, or the problem that arose recently is starting to come into play. So friend
Mm-hmm.
B's partner, she is currently in her in law school. So she
Mm-hmm.
has a little bit of a different schedule than all of us. And
Mm-hmm.
when we were planning this trip and, you know, inviting her to come along, there were some things that we had to keep in mind. Just as a request for her was to keep in mind of a budget and keep in mind like what time of the year we went, so that, you know, classes, internships, etc., weren't really interfering. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, which we are happy to do because typically, like, you know, we're all fine with traveling in the month of August. That just seems to be a good month for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we had all of these, you know, considerations when we were planning, and we finally landed on a spot in January. So now we've
Mm-hmm.
booked our travel, we've booked our stays, and on Monday, friend B and his partner, who's in law school, says, um, we're not so sure if we can afford this trip anymore, and we would like to consider changing the location of the trip.
Oh, oh, wow. So like a kind of a double whammy. Like, wait, you mean you think you won't be coming on this trip after all this planning? And then if you do, it would have to be a different location?
Yes, exactly. That was the request, essentially from this couple.
Mm. Can I just ask you how you felt when that happened? Because I mean, you're describing it with a lot of
Sure.
politeness and I mean, diplomacy. You know, I can tell you really love these people, and then at the same time, it sounds like quite a blow in a way.
Hmm.
Just wondering how it landed for you.
Uh, so definitely for myself, I was very frustrated
Mm.
with this new complication, new obstacle, because, you know, my husband and I are typically the ones that like are the organizers of where we stay, what we do. Like we kind of collect everyone's thoughts and then put it into, it really is a spreadsheet. So we are essentially are just the people that, project manages. So we have already put quite a bit of time and consideration into what we're doing. So we're I personally was very frustrated that this occurred on Monday.
You're like, what? Now you
Yeah,
tell me.
it's and you know, it was one of those conversations. This was in a group text message, and then we discussed it on the phone later. But
Mm.
it was one of those things where it seemed like they had known for quite a while that this could be a possibility,
Oh,
but
yeah,
didn't
right.
say anything. You
Mm,
know,
mm. Yeah, yeah, that's extra frustrating for sure.
so yeah, super frustrated. Um, and we don't have a resolution right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're still considering our options. I had mentioned, you know, kind of relieving us of the stress of replanning a trip. Again, it's April right now, and the trip is planned for August. So, you know, there's a lot to reconsider and configure because we don't even know what the possibilities would be for like a, you know, a new location for the trip. Um,
So when
so
they proposed an alternate location, it wasn't a specific, oh, let's do this. We had this great idea.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't, we're thinking we could go here because it's cheaper by, you know, XYZ. It was, why don't we do a road trip through the Northeast, which is very broad and very vague. There are a lot of
Yeah,
places to see in the Northeast.
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, you know, it was just one of those things where it just feels like there's a lot of stress, and a lot of the decisions that were coming up were starting to feel really contentious between the group.
Oh,
So I, you know, kind of mentioned, why don't we postpone this trip for a few months? I know that we committed to seeing each other at least once a year on this trip, but like, why don't we just postpone it a few months and, maybe we'll have some better options available to meet budget. And
I just
yeah.
want to check with you. It sounds like that experience of it becoming contentious, that was like a difficult moment.
Yes, it was. For me, like my personality is I tend to be a bit of a mediator. I like to try to keep as much peace as possible. Sometimes it's not sometimes it's not an option. And even though I have my feelings, I do feel like I am the person that always ends up being like the moderator of the group and just reminding everybody that, we're making decisions to have fun. We don't need to make decisions to make each other upset.
So I have this image of you're taking on quite a weight on your shoulders. And then you're saying, maybe we should put this off. Were you relieving the weight? What was behind that?
My attempt was just, relieving the weight on all of us, because we all have a stake in this trip, because we have this connection and we want to keep this connection going. And at the same time, it's everybody is charged from the outside world and what's happening in their own personal lives, as well as what's happening in our larger world. So just knowing these people, knowing my friends for as long as I have, it was just one of those offerings to, hey, let's not stress ourselves out over something that we don't really need to be stressed out over.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. So I'm getting this picture of the current situation that involves some disappointment, some frustration, a sense of like, whoa, everyone needs a little more space here. And there's this lovely desire to continue the tradition, to connect, to take care of these friendships. And then also certain boundaries that you want to put in place, something like that. I mean, I'm feeling this whole mix of feelings in the current situation. You've laid it out really clearly so far. And I'm wondering if we just pause for a minute on what you want. How would the situation evolve in a way that felt right to you? What does better look like?
Better would have looked like them coming to us and just, trying to figure it out as a group, with what their concerns were, and maybe being a little bit more flexible with some of the planning considerations. So yeah, I think that's what better would have looked like, and maybe even still could look like, because it's often, sometimes when we being my husband and I and friend A and his partner have had this conversation, when we've had a conversation as a whole 6 of us, it does feel like sometimes we're not getting like the whole story, of like why we can't do this and why we can't do that, which is fine, because I'm trying to empathize and remind myself like some of these things it's just not my business.
Sure.
It's between the couple and the partnership that they have, but when it's a decision that's affecting the whole group, I do feel like we are close enough to the fact where we can have these hard conversations and be honest with one another without feeling defensive.
And have the conversations and be honest with each other. So when you picture that possibility, how does it feel? What's the big difference between how things feel now?
It's a great question. I think that difference, what it would feel like is less of, I don't want to say less. It would feel more like a power with situation. And what I mean by that is some of the decisions we've had to make thus far in the planning process really felt like for the four of us. So me, my husband, partner, or friend A and his girlfriend we're making like a lot of adjustments to specifically meet the needs of friend B's partner. And I guess having this conversation where we're all just really honest with one another, it would feel more, one, I think that it might feel a little bit more inclusive of the whole group, because I want to make sure that we're actually getting everybody's voices heard and voices like and their opinions. But I think it would have felt like more of a collaborative effort.
Yeah,
and I don't
and
know
for
if that makes
you,
sense.
no, it makes a lot of sense. I could see how you'd want that, as opposed to feeling like there's just different people doing different things kind of off and not really. What I can hear is that collaborating would feel better, that you would feel connected and that you'd be working it out, and it would be something you could count on instead of something that sort of keeps falling apart.
Mhm.
And that would feel better.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes feel like, we're having these conversations and we have them with the six of us, and then the two friend B and his partner go off and they have their own conversation, and like then they come to a decision, and then they come back to us, and then we're kind of back to square one with like, but what about what we just talked about? It seems
Yes.
like we leave the conversation on a good place of, okay, this is what we're going to do next, then like this is our decision, that feels good to everybody, but then they have their own private conversation and then come back to us with something that's different than what we had agreed upon or talked about.
So it's really interesting, because I could have imagined you saying, well, what I really want is that we decide on this trip, like a slight modification of the original trip that I spent all this time working on, and that they would finally come around, and like that you were going to say, well, this is the outcome I want. And I hear you saying, well, this is the process I want. What I'm missing is that we can have a higher quality conversation regardless of what the outcome is.
Yeah, that's putting my thoughts into some words, Mark. I definitely would. I mean, the ideal outcome would be that we all agree to go to the same place. Everybody is able to comfortably afford it. And also everybody's excited about it.
Yeah.
That
Right.
is the most ideal outcome. It seems like the struggle we have is in getting to the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then if you imagine for a moment that you now had a wand
Mhm.
and you were able to produce this outcome, what is the capability that the wand gives you?
Mm. I think the wand would give me the capability to I want to say like the wand would give me the capability to hold that space
Uh-huh.
so that we
Right.
can come to an outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what the wand would do.
Very good. Very good. So then if in our conversation, like the
Mhm.
imaginary one where this continues and where we have the time to also have a few different conversations about the same topic, if we were to explore how you could hold that space,
Mhm.
and you could develop some clarity and some conviction about going forward doing that. Would that be helpful? Would that be relevant?
I think that would be helpful. Um, I think what I'm noticing, even talking about the path to getting to the outcome, is that the
Mm-hmm.
thing that we're struggling with is like authentic communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. And so I'm going to ask you one more question about this. Let's say that you learned something in that domain and that you were empowered, like you had some of these magic wand powers, so that you could more easily bring about the authentic communication you want to see.
Mhm.
How would that matter? How else would that be useful in your life?
Mm. I mean, that would be great for any type of interpersonal relationship that I have. I know it would be great for, me as a spouse, and you
Mm.
know, it's first just specifically to this issue that we're having is that it's my
Mm-hmm.
husband's friends too. So he is also
Mm-hmm.
going through this amalgamation of feelings as well. Some might be shared by me, some might not, but he's going through that as well and needs somebody to maybe needs a peer coaching session himself. But even with work, with my colleagues, and being able to talk to them and letting them know that they are being heard, and I could be
Mm.
you know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the magic wand that helps with anything that they might be dealing with.
Mm. So, as we picture you able to hold a space for these conversations with your friends
Hmm.
and also with colleagues and in other contexts, what do you know now that you'll be able to do more easily and more often that will make it, have you holding space that way?
Mm.
Like there might be certain moments in the conversation where you would know to, ask friend B's partner. Like sometimes we can think of authentic communication as having a sort of a respect side and a authentic or honest side.
Hmm.
Like, so some people will say, oh, well, I'm brutally honest all the time and I need to figure out how to be, more gentle in my communication. And then others will say, well, I'm very often gentle, but I sometimes don't say what I'm really thinking.
Hmm.
Um, so you may have a sense of like what you'll be amping up in order to foster this.
hmm Yeah, I think one thing that I would definitely have to put a little bit more energy into is um, one, being brave enough to actually say the things that I'm feeling, because
Mm,
I think part of holding that this conversation is
hmm.
to acknowledge what I'm feeling as well, and that I am also affected by what's happening.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and you know being in that, being brave and saying what I'm feeling, also making sure that I am taking good care of how my words might also affect others. um
Right.
so that's another, I think it's definitely like it's pretty nuanced, and wanting to express how I'm feeling, and also taking care so that we can still maintain a good relationship
Oh yeah,
with the
beautiful.
friends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. So I could picture that through our conversation. So I don't know exactly like how we'll do that, but I could picture that if we put our heads together
Hmm.
and we talk about it, we could probably explore ways in which you could be brave and really say how you're feeling and have it land as, respectful and kind of caring
Hmm.
on the other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So so that this would be a really good example of a challenge of a gap. There's like how things are now and how you'd like them to be, and you've gotten really clear on what your role could be in moving things towards that. And it's like tangible. You can almost feel it. But that doesn't mean that you or I know how to do that, but we know that we're I was going to say barking up the right tree. That's probably the wrong metaphor. We know we're going down the right path. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Awesome.
So why don't we just check out from this part of the conversation? I would say I feel really grateful to have had a chance to share in this with you. I feel like I got a little glimpse of your life. I'm really touched by the friendship and the care for this long friendship that you and your husband are, putting in. And then also just this dilemma. It's so human. How do I be brave and say how I really feel? And at the same time, like not make things worse or not, generate conflict or upset. And so I'm touched by that. I really want to thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Mark. I'll check out and say that I am also very grateful that we were able to talk, and I was actually able to workshop this with you in real time, because we need to make a decision. So we definitely need an outcome, and you definitely helped me get to a space where I can feel confident to continue with a path forward.